At a family reunion, a fight over designer clothes turned violent when my sister yanked my daughter's arm and screamed, "Give it to her right now, you selfish little brat." Tess began to cry from the pain. I ran over and warned, "Leave her alone right now or it will end very badly." My mother quickly joined in and slapped me hard, shouting, "Take your ungrateful brat and get lost. We don't want trash like you here." I said nothing. I made one phone call that left them all white with fear. "My name is Nina. I'm 30 and a single mother to a wonderful 5-year-old. Tess." Since Tess's father, Sean, walked out when she was barely walking, it's been just the two of us. I worked my way up from waiting tables to become a successful real estate agent. More importantly, I'd quietly prepared something that would become a nightmare for my family. They'd always treated me like the family disappointment. Elena, my sister 3 years older, was the golden child, married to her college boyfriend Wesley, with 2 kids, Brandon, 7, and Sophia, 6, living in a big suburban house. My mother, Veronica, constantly compared us, praising Elena while criticizing me for struggling as a single mom. What they didn't know was that I hadn't been struggling for a long time. The reunion took place at my uncle's lake house, where we'd gathered every summer since I was a child. I nearly skipped it, but Tess was eager to see her cousins and I figured it was time to face them. I'd avoided these events for 2 years, citing work, but really I couldn't stand the judgment. Tess looked adorable in a simple pink sundress I'd bought at Target, and I'd treated her to a small designer purse, a Coach outlet find. It was a little indulgent, but she'd earned it. Trouble started fast. Sophia saw Tess's purse and wanted it. Sophia is used to getting everything. Elena and Wesley spoil her with every toy and outfit she wants. Tess, by contrast, appreciates what she has. "I want that purse," Sophia announced, reaching for it. "No, it's mine," Tess said politely, clutching the bag. "Mommy bought it for me, but I want it more," Sophia protested, louder. Brandon, who likes to stir things up, piled on. "Yeah, she's being mean. She should share with family." I was across the yard helping my aunt set up food, but I saw the scene getting worse. Tess held the purse tightly, tears starting as Brandon and Sophia reached for it. "It's not fair," Sophia yelled. The irony was obvious. Sophia wore a dress and accessories that probably cost more than my monthly groceries, yet she demanded Tess's one new thing. Then Elena stormed over. Without asking what happened, she grabbed Tess's arm and twisted it, yelling at my 5-year-old, "Give it to her right now, you selfish little brat." Tess cried from pain and from shock that a grown relative would treat her like that. I went into protective mode, dropped what I was doing and confronted Elena. "Leave her alone right now or it will end very badly," I said, keeping my voice calm despite my fear and anger. Elena tightened her grip. "Your brat needs to learn some manners. Sophia wants this purse, and Tess should give it to her. Let go of my daughter." I reached for Tess to pull her away. My mother then rushed over and slapped me across the face. The sound carried across the yard and everyone stared. "Take your ungrateful brat and get lost. We don't want trash like you here," Veronica screamed. The slap stung, but the words hurt more. I watched my daughter cling to me, confused and frightened, while our family called us names. I could have yelled, struck back, or grabbed Tess and left as they expected. Instead, I walked away quietly, holding Tess's hand, and took her to a quiet corner. I checked her arm where Elena had grabbed her. There would be bruises. "Mommy, why was Elena so mean to me?" Tess asked. "I don't know, sweetheart," I replied honestly, "but it's not okay and it won't happen again." Then I pulled out my phone and made one call. "Hi, this is Nina Mitchell. I need to speak with Elias Ford. Please tell him it's urgent." My family continued the reunion, casting looks but not checking on Tess or apologizing. My mother held court at the food table, probably reshaping the story to paint me as the villain. Elena comforted Sophia, who was still upset about the purse. Within 10 minutes my phone rang. "Nina, what's the emergency?" Elias's voice was measured. Elias Ford had been my lawyer for 3 years. First for my real estate business and more recently for something more personal and potentially devastating to my family. "Proceed with everything we discussed. All of it today." He hesitated. Are you sure? Once we start, there's no going back. I looked across at my family laughing and oblivious and said absolutely sure. Do it now. You should start seeing results within the hour. I hung up and sat with Tess on a bench by the lake. She quickly returned to playing with her purse. Resilient as children are, I had not forgotten. What my family didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment for years. Growing up with them felt like navigating a minefield. Every holiday or gathering was an opportunity for my mother and sister to highlight my failures. When I got pregnant at 24, unmarried and working as a waitress, they treated it like a disgrace. My mother yelled about what people would think, and my sister complained about the embarrassment to her household. When Sean left before Tess was born, they felt proven right and savored the humiliation. I filed every slight away, every cutting remark, every exclusion, every time they made Tess and me feel unwelcome. The worst was 18 months before the reunion, Brandon's 6th birthday. Elena had explicitly told me not to bring a gift so Tess wouldn't feel bad about not having anything nice. When I arrived without a present, Elena publicly shamed me, announcing that I hadn't bothered to bring Brandon anything. Tess was confused and hurt. That night I started documenting everything: dates, witnesses, words, behaviors. At first it was therapeutic, but I knew I was building a record. The turning point came when Tess asked why Grandma Veronica didn't love her like she loved Brandon and Sophia. How do you explain that to a 4-year-old? That question convinced me mere notes weren't enough. I needed to protect Tess and prevent them from hurting other children the way they'd hurt her. I'd seen Elena's parenting mirror our family's toxicity: yelling, name-calling, diminishing mistakes. I started researching emotional abuse, the evidence required, and legal protective options. That's when I reconnected with Elias Ford. We'd gone to high school together. He specialized in family law and estate planning. When I explained my situation, he said, "This isn't normal family dysfunction. It looks like systematic emotional abuse. You have options." He helped me understand the remedies available and how to gather proof. More importantly, he helped me see I had more power than I realized. Everything intensified 3 years earlier when my grandmother, Grandma Maeve, died. She'd always been the one family member who treated me kindly. On her deathbed, she called me to her side and said she'd noticed how Veronica and Elena treated me and Tess. She told me she'd changed her will and was leaving everything to me, not out of spite, but because I understood kindness and hard work. She warned me Veronica and Elena expected to inherit and would be furious. She'd also been watching Veronica manage some of her finances and suspected theft. She handed me a folder with evidence she'd gathered and told me she'd hired a private investigator. She said if Veronica continued stealing from the estate, I could remove her as trustee, but I would need patience and an airtight case. I cried then, both for her faith in me and for the validation of what we'd endured. At Grandma Maeve's funeral, the family exploded. Veronica screamed at the lawyer, Elena had a tantrum, and accusations flew. The lawyer remained professional, the will was legal, and executed properly. But my grandmother had set a condition: I wouldn't get full control of the inheritance until I turned 35, 3 years away. In the meantime, the estate would be managed by a trust with my mother as a trustee alongside the family lawyer. Relatives whispered that this would prevent me from squandering the money. What they didn't know was that Grandma had anticipated trouble. She left instructions, and the investigators contact with directions to monitor the trust. If Veronica stole, there'd be grounds to remove her and seek early control. So that's what I did. For 3 years I monitored every trust transaction. Elias taught me what to watch for, and how to build a court-proof case. Veronica thought she could take small amounts unnoticed. A few hundred here, 1,000 there, consulting fees that couldn't be verified. Over time it totaled nearly $150,000. She used the money for furniture, vacations, even paying off Elena's credit cards, all hidden as trust expenses. Elias and I documented everything. Meanwhile, I built my own life. The legitimate portion of the inheritance helped me return to school and get my real estate license. Within 2 years I started earning far more than I'd imagined. I bought a small house for Tess and me, opened a college fund for her, and planned for the day I'd control my grandmother's legacy. Even more importantly, I learned to value myself and to teach Tess to value herself. We started therapy together to repair the damage the family's cruelty had done. Tess learned she was deserving of love. I learned I didn't have to accept mistreatment from relatives. Our therapist, Dr. Naomi Fields, explained that the family's behavior wasn't mere meanness. It was systematic abuse designed to keep us feeling powerless and dependent. They need you to feel worthless, she said, because if you knew your value, you wouldn't tolerate this. Therapy gave me the strength to set boundaries. I stopped showing up at gatherings where we were mistreated. I refused my mother's loans that came with strings. I stopped trying to win their approval and focused on building a life that made Tess and me happy. The more independent I became, the angrier they got. Calls turned nastier. Veronica cried on the phone about how I was tearing the family apart. Elena left voicemails accusing me of thinking I was superior because I no longer tolerated abuse. You used to be so sweet and agreeable, my mother complained during one particularly ugly call. Now you're cold and selfish. What happened to the daughter I raised? What happened was this. I finally realized I deserved better. I understood that my primary job as Tessa's mother was to shield her from the same treatment I'd endured. I stopped fearing their disapproval and started fearing the thought of passing their toxicity on to my daughter. The tipping point occurred 10 months before the reunion. At Brandon's 7th birthday, Elena had forgotten to invite Tess and me. She later claimed it was an oversight. When we arrived anyway, my aunt quietly told us we weren't expected. Elena loudly complained about not having enough food or favors for unplanned guests, lecturing the other parents about RSVPs. Tess, then 4.5, clung to my leg while the other kids played. No one invited her into the games or made sure she got cake. She sat beside me the whole party, excluded. That night Tess asked why the other children were mean. How do you explain to a 4-year-old that adults have poisoned other children against her? How do you tell your child some people resent her for circumstances she didn't choose? That question ended the documentation phase and started action. The next morning I called Elias and told him to move to remove my mother as trustee and to pursue legal action against Elena and Wesley over shoddy construction on a hotel property. Are you sure? Elias asked. Once we start, there's no going back. Family relationships would be permanently damaged. I looked at Tess playing with her dolls and thought of her confused face at the party. I thought of all the future gatherings where she'd feel unwanted and the therapy it would take to undo those messages. Those relationships are already damaged, I told Elias. The choice is protect Tess or keep exposing her to people who see her as less than human. We spent the next 10 months building the case. The embezzlement evidence was solid. My mother had been careless trying to hide irregular transfers. The construction fraud case was likewise strong. Wesley's company had cut corners, used substandard materials, and caused significant damage to a hotel, forcing a closure and costly repairs. Emotionally, Dr. Fields helped Tess and me prepare for the inevitable family fallout. We role-played scenarios, rehearsed responses to anger and manipulation, and learned to stay calm. Their anger is not your responsibility, Dr. Fields reminded me. You are protecting your child, and that is the right choice. I'd hoped the family reunion might allow for reconciliation before legal proceedings began. A chance for them to see Tess and soften. Instead, Elena's physical assault on my daughter and my mother's slur confirmed my decision. At Grandma Maeve's will reading, everyone learned she'd left everything to me. The family house, Churchy, $600,000. Investments, Churchy, $900,000. And a profitable boutique hotel business built over decades. Grandma explained her reasons in her will. She trusted my values and kindness. But she set a restriction. I wouldn't gain full control until I turned 33, 3 years away. Meanwhile, the estate income would be held in trust, with my mother named a trustee alongside the family lawyer, receiving a modest fee. What they didn't know was that Grandma anticipated trouble. She left me instructions, the private investigator's contact, and documentation showing questionable financial activity. I monitored the trust closely. My mother believed she could siphon small regular amounts disguised as administrative or maintenance expenses. Over 3 years, she took nearly $75,000. She thought the sums were small and would go unnoticed. She underestimated me. I recorded every irregular withdrawal and questionable expense. Elias helped me build an airtight fraud and breach of fiduciary duty case. We'd planned to wait until closer to my 35th birthday, but the assault on Tess and my mother's abusive language accelerated the timeline. About an hour after I made my call at the reunion, my mother's phone rang. I watched her expression change from confusion to panic. She called someone else. Probably her lawyer. Then phones began ringing across the gathering. The DA's office had informed her she was under investigation for embezzlement and breach of duty. 20 minutes later, Elena and Wesley were called as well. The party atmosphere shifted. Whispers and sideways glances replaced the earlier chatter. Elias texted, "Embezzlement evidence submitted to district attorney. Construction lawsuit filed in civil court. Trustee removal petition filed in probate." Everything was officially in motion. Wesley's company had been hired 18 months earlier for hotel renovations. The work was shoddy. Corners cut, cheaper materials, ignored safety protocols. Repairs and lost revenue cost the trust nearly $1 million. Elias built a case for breach of contract, fraud and negligent construction. Elena, as Wesley's business partner, handling finance and project management, was equally implicated. My mother confronted me, panicked and furious. "What did you do?" she hissed. I answered calmly, "I don't know what you mean." She accused me of lies. I replied with facts. Her hand twitched as if to strike, but there were too many witnesses. "After everything we've done for you, what have you done for me?" she demanded. I listed the trust expenses she'd disguised as legitimate vacations, a new car, credit card bills. Her face went white. Elena appeared, equally alarmed. "Nah, what's going on?" she cried. "Our lawyer called about the hotel lawsuit." "This is insane," she said. "Actually, it's justice," I replied, standing, taking Tess's hand. "Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" By then the reunion had stopped pretending not to hear. My mother grabbed my arm, mirroring Elena's earlier aggression toward Tess. "Call this off," she ordered. I looked at her and answered, "Family doesn't steal, family doesn't hurt children, family doesn't call a 5-year-old trash. That was assault on my child." I removed her hand, picked up Tess, and said we were leaving. I warned them, the DA would contact her about the criminal investigation. Elena and Wesley would hear from my lawyer about the civil suit. CPS would be informed about what had happened. The mention of CPS made several relatives gasp. "You wouldn't dare call CPS on family," my mother whispered. I had already filed the report. Many people at the reunion had seen what happened. Several family members later offered to testify. Some had been too intimidated by my mother before, but when it mattered they did what was right. A cousin offered to give a statement. My uncle's wife had photographed the bruising on Tess's arm. Not everyone in my family was terrible. Elena begged for reconciliation and apologized, tearful. "I was trying to teach her to share," she said. I replied that physically hurting a child was not teaching and that she would not have the opportunity again. I put Tess in the car and drove away. Tess asked, "Mommy, are we in trouble?" "No, sweetheart. We're not in trouble. The people who hurt you are in trouble," she responded plainly. "Good. They were mean." The next 18 months were legally busy. My mother was arrested and charged with embezzlement and breach of fiduciary duty after a thorough DA investigation. The amounts warranted felony charges. Her lawyer sought a deal, but Elias advised pursuing full restitution and incarceration, given the strength of the evidence. Elena and Wesley's company faced civil suits for breach of contract, fraud, and negligence. Their insurer initially resisted, but ultimately settled for $240,000, double the trust's losses. CPS conducted a thorough investigation. They interviewed Tess, me, and witnesses. They didn't remove Brandon or Sophia from Elena's home, but they required family counseling and placed the family on a monitoring list. 15 months into the process, The court granted my petition to remove my mother as trustee and appointed me to oversee Grandma Maeve's estate. At 30, I gained full control of my inheritance 3 years early. My first acts: end my mother's trustee fee, bar Wesley's company from future hotel work, and dedicate part of the funds to a college savings account for Tess, so she'd never depend on others' charity. My mother pleaded guilty to avoid trial and received 18 months in prison with a possibility of early release for good behavior. Elena and Wesley's company went bankrupt, trying to cover the settlement and legal costs. They sold the McMansion and moved into a modest rental. The family split. Some say I went too far and should have resolved things privately, still treating my mother and sister as victims. Others privately praised me for protecting Tess and apologized for not speaking up. I no longer attend family reunions. I don't want Tess around people who think it's acceptable to hurt children or steal from them. We gather instead with relatives who have proven kind and trustworthy. Tess is thriving: a strong private school, dance and piano lessons, and a college fund secured by the estate. She never asks why we don't see Aunt Elena or Grandma Veronica. Children adapt. She's moved on much better than I have. Sometimes I wonder if I overreacted and should have tried private resolution first. Then I remember the look on Tess's face when Elena grabbed her arm and my mother calling her trash. No, I reacted appropriately to years of abuse. The lesson is simple: blood doesn't give someone the right to hurt you or your child. Theft, abuse, and cruelty aren't excused by family ties. Sometimes the most loving act is cutting toxic people out, even when they share your DNA. My grandmother would be proud. She always believed protecting those you love and standing up for yourself mattered more than keeping peace at any cost. Tess still has the Coach purse. She brings it to special occasions and tells people it reminded her that mommy is brave. She may not fully understand the legal fallout, but she knows I fought for her. That's what matters. We've built our own traditions and found a chosen family of people who love her unconditionally. She has grandparents who spoil her kindly, and aunts and uncles who teach without tearing down her self-worth. The phone call I made that day did more than stop future abuse. It taught Tess she's worth protecting, that there are consequences for those who hurt her, and that her mother will fight for her no matter the cost. That to me is the legacy I want to leave. Not property or money, but the knowledge that she is valuable, loved, and will never accept less than she deserves. The last I heard, my mother was adjusting to prison as well as could be expected. Elena and Wesley are slowly rebuilding after their losses. Brandon and Sophia are engaged in counseling and learning better ways to handle disappointment. I don't wish them ill. I hope they become better people. But I don't feel obligated to ease their path or pretend their actions were acceptable. Tess and I have a beautiful life now, surrounded by people who treat us with respect. We're happy, healthy, and free from the toxic dynamics of my childhood. One phone call changed everything. It ended years of tolerating unacceptable behavior and started a new chapter where Tess will grow up knowing her worth. Sometimes protecting your child means making choices. Others will judge. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and raising a child who knows her value. That family reunion was the last time anyone laid a hand on my daughter in anger. One phone call, that's all it took, and I'd make the same call again in a heartbeat.